Hello, everyone. Everything you want out of life is in that bubbling vat of failure. The trick is to get the good stuff out. Those two sentences are written in bold on the back cover of How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, Kind of the Story of My Life, by Scott Adams. You probably know Scott best from his immensely popular Dilbert comic strip. But did you know of his spectacular string of failures? He's just as much a professional at failing as he is a cartoonist, author, and public speaker. The word failure has a nasty connotation. When we Google it, we are informed that failure is the lack of success. So how can a man like Scott Adams court failure so many times over the course of his life and come out with an enviable level of success? This is the big question he attempts to answer in his book. The result is an interesting review of his life and his philosophies of how to find success in life. As with my previous book reviews, I will break this review of how to fail at almost everything and still win big into 4 parts: content, readability, personal enjoyment, and final recommendation. Content. How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big covers large amounts of ground in its couple hundred pages. From the introduction, Scott gives us the following tease for what we can expect. 1. Goals are for losers. 2. Your mind isn't magic. It's a moist computer you can program. 3. The most important metric to track is your personal energy. 4. Every skill you acquire doubles your chance of success. 5. Happiness is health plus freedom. 6. Luck can be managed, sort of. 7. Conquer shyness by being a huge phony, in a good way. 8. Fitness is the lever that moves the world. 9. Simplicity transforms the ordinary into amazing. Woven into all these topics are personal stories about Scott and the ways he has succeeded or failed, patterns he has seen in life, and a couple bouts he's had with major medical issues. There are also other topics he touches on that are not on this list, such as his 6 filters for truth, passion is BS, and the idea that willpower is a limited resource, so it is best to shift your desires so as not to use too much of it. Many of these topics were convincing, or at least presented as a worthwhile alternate point of view. For example, Scott's take is that goals are for losers. There are also mountains of books, articles, videos, seminars, and coaches who teach people the importance of setting goals. These ideas seem mutually exclusive. So who is right? Scott's argument is that too many people set goals for themselves and then run into problems once they reach them. In order to be healthier, I want to lose 10 pounds by the end of the year, is exactly the kind of smart goal we are all taught to set in school or work. To Scott, the problem is not the goal itself. The problem is achieving it, or being in a consistent state of failure until you achieve it. If this individual lost their 10 pounds by the end of the year, now what? We all know what happens to most of the population. Motivation wanes, and before you know it, our slimmed-down individual has put the weight back on. In one chapter of How to Fail at Almost Everything, Scott puts forward a different solution: ditch goals and build systems. Goals are defined as specific objectives that you either achieve or don't sometime in the future, and systems are defined as something you do on a regular basis that increases your odds of happiness in the long run. Based on these definitions, I can see the value in Scott's line of thinking. If your mindset is such that you believe you are in a consistent state of failure until you reach your goal, and then you are lost because you have nothing else to strive for, a system is a much better methodology. Scott uses this in his everyday life and has built massive amounts of success for himself, so perhaps it is wise to experiment with his ideas. Many of the chapters within this book give you similar perspectives to consider. In my opinion, the biggest contributions this book will have to the average reader are chapters 20 and 21, entitled Managing Your Odds for Success and the Math of Success. These chapters introduce a key concept: the idea that each skill you acquire doubles your chance for success. The math looks like this: good plus good is greater than great. How does that work in practice? Let's take another example. Suppose you have 2 people. One is great at using Microsoft Excel, and the second guy is good, but not at the same level as the first guy. Who will be more successful? The answer is the one with the better complementary skill, If the person who is great with Excel is only great with Excel and nothing else, he will have trouble making a living. If the second person who is good at Excel is also good at public speaking, he will be able to let these two skills work together to give presentations to novices about how to develop their own skills. Scott argues that you do not need to be world-class at every skill you pick up to be a success. Just pick up a wide variety of skills, get good at them, and then use the ones that complement each other to try a whole bunch of new things. Something will eventually click, and you will be successful. But what if you fail? The trick is making sure you put enough effort into your failures so that you gain something, even if the endeavor fails. If you evaluate your failures, you will find you learned something important in almost all of them. Some lessons are rather obvious, like, if you want to teach a seminar on wine tasting, do not drink heavily and vomit on a police officer, because jail is unpleasant. Others will teach you very important skills, even if things go sour on you, like podcasts on knitting don't work, but at least you learned how to write scripts and record high-quality audio. That's the best part of this system. After explaining the basic math of success, Scott gives us a list of skills he believes the average adult should develop a working knowledge of, then goes into detail on why each skill was included. This could be an excellent way to get people started on regular and continuous self-improvement if you are mentoring someone who doesn't quite know what they want to do with themselves. There is quite a bit more we could talk about, but I think you get the idea. Overall, I quite enjoyed the content provided in How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. Most of it is helpful, and while there are parts that are only okay, I didn't feel as though these were a major drag on the book. I rank content a 4 out of 5. Readability. How to Fail at Almost Everything is not a chore to read, but it does feel a little thick at times. Scott is an intelligent man who has a strong command of English vocabulary. The impression I received was that every sentence is comprised by many longer than average words. That might be a bit of a controversial statement, and I want to be clear that if I was the editor for Scott Adams, I would not have advised him to adjust the wording throughout the book. It does read well enough, but I do believe some people who are less well-read may have some trouble getting through the book unless they took their time and put in a little more effort. To give you some flavor of how the book reads, I will quote part of Chapter 9, which is entitled, Deciding versus Wanting. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard goes something like this. If you want success, figure out the price, then pay it. It sounds trivial and obvious, but if you unpack the idea, it has extraordinary power. I know a lot of people who wish they were rich or famous or otherwise fabulous. They wish they had yachts and servants and castles, and they wish they could travel the world in their own private jets. But these are mere wishes. Few of these wishful people have decided to have any of the things they wish for. It's a key difference, for once you decide, you take action. Wishing starts in the mind and generally stays there. When you decide to be successful in a big way, it means you acknowledge the price and you're willing to pay it. That price might be sacrificing your personal life to get good grades in school, pursuing a college major that is deadly boring but lucrative, putting off having kids, missing time with your family, or taking business risks that put you in jeopardy for embarrassment, divorce, or bankruptcy. Successful people don't wish for success. They decide to pursue it. And to pursue it effectively, they need a system. Success always has a price, but the reality is that that price is negotiable. If you pick the right system, the price will be a lot nearer to what you're willing to pay. End quote. As you can see, this is a persuasive and interesting concept that makes a lot of sense. It's not too tough to read through, but it also gives you enough information where you feel compelled to stop and evaluate how you measure up to the statements made in those paragraphs. My few concerns aside, I believe How to Fail at Almost Everything is a generally readable book that will not give the average person too much trouble. I rank readability a 4 out of 5. Personal enjoyment. This section is based on the amount of enjoyment I anticipate the average person will take out of this book, not my own. And with that disclaimer in mind, we get to the tightrope Scott walks throughout How to Fail at Almost Everything. What kind of book is this? At this point in the review, you may think that's a silly question. After all, haven't we spent quite a bit of time on the various systems in the book and how they can help you become successful? Yes, we have. However, that's not all there is to this book, and we need to keep Scott Adams' main profession in mind. He's a cartoonist who draws a humorous look at everyday life and business. So it is reasonable for anyone picking up this book to expect to see some Dilbert comics within, and that the book will be funny. However, the title makes two more promises. How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big promises the book will demystify how to become successful, while the subtitle, Kind of the Story of My Life, promises to reveal more about Scott Adams, the man, in an autobiographical manner. So, is this a humorous book with comics, an autobiography, or a self-development look on the principles of success? The answer is all three. Scott Adams recognizes the conundrum and addresses this within the text. I'll talk a bit about how I viewed it, both before and after reading the book. Before I cracked it open, I assumed it was going to be a book about success and how to find your own. For the most part, I think that is what I got out of it. That should be fairly evident by the amount of time I spent in this review on content. I found the book to be amusing, but not laugh out loud funny, but I didn't expect to see any humor, so the book didn't need to sell me on that. There are also a handful of Dilbert comics sprinkled throughout the chapters, but again, that wasn't something that sold me. One thing I definitely didn't expect was the amount of time Scott spent on his medical issues and how he overcame them. To me, these were interesting because they were ailments I had never heard of before, and Scott's battle with them was something I personally found compelling. However, reading about medical issues is an area where your mileage may vary. So what does all this mean to the personal enjoyment score? Anyone who comes in looking for heavy amounts of humor, lots of Dilbert comics, or who does not enjoy reading about medical issues at all will be somewhat put off. Ultimately, however, I think the majority of people who read this will enjoy themselves. I rank personal enjoyment a 4 out of 5. Final recommendation. Recently, I've noticed Scott Adams being quoted or referenced more and more often as I check Gab, Twitter, Facebook, or the blogs I read. I've also seen him on a couple YouTube videos. He was one of the few people to understand the phenomenon that was candidate Donald Trump, and has done a great job explaining what was happening and why to his audience. How to Fail at Almost Anything is a unique and interesting book. Not many cartoonists have the breadth and depth of experiences and knowledge Scott has. And as I mentioned in the personal enjoyment section, he walks a tightrope to satisfy the different audiences this book will have. I believe he's done so successfully. When it comes to the self-development parts of How to Fail at Almost Anything, the big question has to be asked. Do the techniques within work? Well, Scott gives us a strategy that is designed to work over the long haul, so I cannot predict with 100% accuracy whether or not it will work for everyone. But I did put a couple of his techniques to the test while writing this review, and they do seem to work. His ideas also pass the common sense filter for me. The easy math of good plus good is greater than great, or happiness equals health plus freedom, just makes sense. Keeping those simple concepts in mind can be life-altering for people who are trying to memorize and implement many complex ways to find success and happiness in their own life. This book stacks well with other business or self-development techniques. I believe Scott Adams has written a very good book, bordering on greatness. It should be high up on the to-read list for people serious about self-development. I rank How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big a 4 out of 5. What's next? My next review will be Scipio Africanus, Greater Than Napoleon by B.H. Liddell Hart. This is an older book, but one I think is worthy of study. I'll explain my reasoning for this when the video drops in the next week or so. From there, I am going to switch gears and review a couple lecture series from the great courses, before going back to books. There was also a major news story I am compelled to comment on: the firing of Bill O'Reilly. You can expect that one soon. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.